Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Hi, everyone. Welcome today. We are so grateful that you're here with us on the Preserving Families podcast. And I am excited as we start today to have my daughter Cassidy with me. Cassidy is also a marriage and family therapist in the Dallas area. And Cassidy, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be back on your podcast.
Yeah, and it's always great to grab you when you're in town and get you to come over here to do this. So thank you, Cass.
My pleasure.
So here's a question for you, because we're both in this same business together. And people always ask me this question. They probably ask it of you too, but they're always like, okay, tell me what the most common problems are that you see in counseling. And I always tell them that that's hard. It's hard to say there's just one thing, because it really is a lot of different stuff. But there definitely could be themes or kind of root issues that kind of fuel everything else. So Cass, what's happening in Dallas?
No, I so agree. I get that question a lot, and I never know how to answer because people come to therapy with very different problems. But I will say there maybe is this overarching root or pattern, right, where people just have a lot going on in their lives, a lot of stress, a lot of things that cause life to feel hard.
Yeah, and even people that may not have a lot of responsibility or weight on their shoulders, they're still overflowing with things to do, right? Like I just always tell people, I just remember literally as a kid growing up in Houston, Texas, sitting with my family in our family room every night almost, watching TV. I know that sounds horrible now as we look back on
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah, but we really did. And my brother and I always had sports, so we had games a night or two a week. But if it wasn't that, our family was just gathered around watching TV. Now, once again, we weren't members of the church, not a super religious family, and so we didn't have extra things to do. But now, if my wife and I, your mom, ever have a night where we're just home by ourselves, that's like a miracle.
Yeah. And even for people who maybe don't have as heavy as a load on paper, they still feel stressed, right? I think just in the world we live in, with the amount of media we're consuming every day, the amount of activities our kids are in, the demands of life, everything just feels hard. Financial responsibilities, I think, are a huge thing that bring people stress. It almost just seems like, not even comparing to anyone else, everyone is dealing with that right now.
Yeah. Cassie, years ago, I was asked to go to a hospital every month to give a presentation to teachers in the Mesa public school system on stress. And so back in those days, we didn't really have the internet. That was just kind of becoming a thing. So you had to go do research in different places. But I came across a term that said, the world is becoming a global village. And this was in the mid-90s. But the idea of a global village was, now everything that's out there going on in the world can be right in front of us on a screen.
It's so real.
So now we're bringing all this.
There's just a lot of information consumption. Like,
Right.
How do I know what's going on in another country right now? But I do,
Yeah, we can read about Mexico imploding or whatever. And 10 years ago or 20 years ago, we would have probably never even heard that story, because there's other stories that probably outweigh it. But now, like you say, this just brings a lot of stress into our lives with everything from the weather to the news to our lives to crazy things going on out there, right?
Yeah, it's true. The other day I've been more mindful of my phone use, my social media use lately. And the other day I opened my app and was hit, because I haven't been on it so much, I'm not as desensitized anymore. I was hit with every single post in a row was bad news. It really was. It was and tragic, real things that are happening to people, but it was a lot to consume at like 8 a.m. in the morning. When normally if that wasn't happening, right? We all were probably not meant to know that much information.
Yeah, we weren't created to absorb all that. In fact, your mom and I used to go to bed every night watching the news, and I haven't done that for 20 years because I finally said to her, wait, why am I going to go? Why do we want to go to bed watching the worst things in
Yeah.
the world going on? I want to laugh hysterically to myself to sleep. So
it's so, and then like to even make it more personal on a micro level, right? Most of the people in my same stage of life, we're in this stage of life where maybe our husbands are working 80-hour weeks trying to build up their careers. We're all trying to make ends meet. We're trying to figure out how to raise young children, right? And then you guys are maybe at a different state. Everyone, even just personally, on top of what's happening in the world, has so much stress.
Now I look back on our life when we were in your stage and think of just being up 2 or 3 times a night with a baby, of
like
how stressful that was, right?
That alone, I'm in that stage right now.
Right. You know, Cassie, ever since Elder Holland's death, you know, in late December, by the way, same day your baby was born, McKenna, right? On December the 27th. But there's just been so many great stories and things, statements, quotes that have come up. And one that keeps being told, as you mentioned to me a little while ago, was Elder Holland's great story that he told in the 1983 General Conference as the president of BYU, not even as a general authority. And we won't get into all the details of it, but just that story of coming home, being stressed, being overwhelmed, having the weight of the world on his shoulders, and ends up taking his frustrations and his stress out on his son. And I always tell people, I don't think there was a dad in that audience that night that couldn't relate to that. And I can't tell you how many times in my own life that it became really easy to just express my anger and frustrations in our family after stressful things at work or with our finances or whatever challenging thing was going on. It was easy to be kind of not so nice at home sometimes, right? Because we wear that stress on ourselves. And some of us take that out on our children. Some of us take that out on our spouse. It's easy to do.
I know. Most of the times I snap at my daughter. It's not because she's even
being
doing something that crazy, right? She's just a normal 3-year-old. Most of the time it's because I'm kind of out of my window of tolerance.
Oh, Cassie, I love new words and phrases. Window of tolerance. Talk to me for a minute, because I think I've been living out of my window of tolerance for years.
The window of tolerance is a term I use a lot with my clients when I work with them, but kind of just maybe an analogy referring to that really sweet spot in life where we're able to handle the things that come, right? Where we feel calm, where we feel safe, where we feel in control, we all maybe can recognize that feeling where when, let's use that example with my daughter, right? Where when maybe she does something that feels obnoxious or loud or makes a mess, and I'm able to be like, that's okay, sweetie, we'll clean it up. We're fine, right? Like that. Some days I'm able to do that, and some days when she does that, it feels like almost the end of the world to me, right? Like I could actually lose my mind. It's just one more thing that makes me feel like life is too overwhelming. But we're in the window of tolerance, we can handle the things that come to us. We feel like we can maybe think about other people. We can manage
our emotions
well. We can manage the tasks that we have to do that day. Again, it's just that comfort zone really where you feel like you're very in control. When you leave the window of tolerance, we talk about it in the psychology world as leaving it basically one of 2 ways. Maybe by feeling too much or by feeling too little, which we would see in the world a lot with maybe like dissociation, people who just decide to not try at all, right? Maybe that looks like numbing, isolating, being withdrawn, feeling detached, laying in bed all day, watching Netflix, right? That's a way people leave the window of tolerance for sure.
Yeah.
Another way in the opposite direction would be, again, people who feel too much, that fight flight response. So when you're anxious, angry, overwhelmed, impulsive, out of control, that's all signs, right, that you're maybe not in a window where you can tolerate life that well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really interesting that you kind of show it on both ends of the spectrum, because I actually see probably more people today withdrawing and isolating rather than erupting and going berserk. Although we see the erupting and going berserk is what we see on the media.
Yeah. It's more obvious for
right.
sure. A huge goal I have with the clients that I work with in therapy is to be able to expand that window of tolerance,
Right.
where we can expand this window where life feels more doable. But it's hard when there are constantly things that maybe are shrinking that window. And I think that's important to acknowledge that trauma, stress, when we aren't sleeping well, maybe when there's physical sickness. You just mentioned I just had a baby 7 weeks ago. That's a stage where I feel like my window of tolerance has felt a little smaller.
Right.
Those who are experiencing grief and loss, it's pretty normal for that window where we can tolerate life to feel small at times. But if we can find some tools maybe to make that feel more expanded, we can just cope and handle life in a way better way.
So true. Okay, Cass, as a marriage and family therapist, and here we are talking about these stress-related issues, but what are the implications on a marriage, on a family? What do you see? And what does the research tell us?
Yeah. Stress is huge. Just speaking from what I've worked with a lot of the couples I've seen, I think stress really does impact the family and marriage so much. Stress tends to make people feel less emotionally available. There's less connectedness in a marriage if it's not handled well. Stress impacts the way that parents show up for their kids. It affects financial scripts and the way we deal and talk about money. It affects sex and intimacy. It affects the way we communicate. It's huge. It affects the time even that we have to show up for the people in our lives.
I think that's so true, Cass. And we can both think of maybe examples of some of these things, but right when you said communication, that was one of the things I was thinking is often when couples are stressed, either they're communicating at what's a good word? Almost like there's an anger that's
sharp, maybe critical.
Or they withdraw and they don't talk at all.
Yeah, those different sides of the window for sure.
The patience grows super thin with any mistake our children make. I could just think of so many things in my own life with our own children where I was so stressed about some of these things we've talked about earlier, and I know that I may have taken it out on them when they didn't deserve that, and so it affects our willingness to even be with our family, right? The idea is you kind of want to just isolate sometimes.
It's so true.
But then anger, when it morphs into anger, that's when it becomes a real problem in my mind, because every time you express anger, I always think of it this way, but you're just putting a brick on the wall. And over time, the wall becomes so high and so thick that there is no relationship.
Totally.
You just don't have a relationship at all.
Yeah, I think stress also impacts our ability to think rationally and to think positively about our spouse. I know that stress has contributed to me maybe like feeling resentful in situations where I was just projecting and not fully being aware of what's happening, right? I'm less emotionally available. Yeah, I'm exactly.
And Cassie, one of the things I've noticed with myself is that what stress will often do is cause me to think the worst of my family members instead of the best of them, right? Kind of back to Elder Holland again, who did say exactly the opposite of that when it comes to those you love, we should think the best of each other. You should assume the good and doubt the bad. And I think when you're really stressed, it's hard to do that sometimes.
To use a clinical example, and I'll just not use any specifics to maintain the privacy of these clients, but I was working with a client or two clients as a couple, and when they came into therapy, it was really obvious that they were going through so much. And the first few sessions that we met, it almost just felt overwhelming even to hear what they were going through. I couldn't imagine the way that they felt actually living it. And it seemed like in every single area of their marriage and in their life, things just felt really hard and heavy. They were having communication problems, financial problems parenting their adult children, sexual difficulties, addiction problems, so many different challenges. And it really led to them being so mean towards each other. They were highly, highly critical, using really mean language about each other. And it just felt for them that their marriage was really coming to an end. It didn't feel like there was any hope for them that they could get to a place where they once were.
Right.
In our sessions one day, I had them take a life stress inventory. It's a document that we often use that has weighted the levels of stress that happen in a person's life. So any stressful thing that could happen and has been found in research, they have weighted it with a number associated with it. For example, the death of a spouse has a value of 100.
That's like the maximum score, right?
Yeah, really high. They even have things like a holiday or a vacation with scores like 13. But so many different things in that range, right?
So just having a mortgage on your home is 31 points, everyone.
Yeah.
Or having in-laws or in-law troubles, 29 points.
Exactly. Right? Pregnancy is 40 points.
Yeah.
In-law troubles, you said, 29 points. Troubles with a boss, a change in a residence, a change in your job, even just having social activities has a number associated with it, 18.
Yeah.
So many different things. I actually think it's a really cool exercise in our own marriages to do things like this. I can tell a story about that later on. But I had the clients I was working with do this inventory. Let me just say that according to the research, they say that a score higher than 300 implies an 80% risk of a health-related breakdown, and actually a major health-related breakdown in the next 2 years, according to this model. So a score of 300, a score even of 150 is still putting you in a risky category. The couple I was working with had a score of 988.
Which is like off the charts, right?
Off the charts. And it was so interesting to watch them as they were able to just identify things that have happened in their life over the last 2 years. And for them to receive that score, I didn't even know what to predict or how they would respond to that, but they actually broke into hysterics laughing. And it was one of the first times I had even seen them connect in our practice.
Maybe they were like, hey, now we know what's wrong with us, right?
Yeah, I think it did feel, it's like that relief you feel when you receive a correct diagnosis, right? It's like, oh, I finally know what's wrong happening, right?
Yeah.
There's a relief to that. And watching them even laugh and find just humor in the things that have happened, a lot of them, right, because of absolutely no choice of their own, things that were happening with their children, changes in their work, new family members, even down to horrible things like death of parents and death of close friends. And they were able to really at least find some sort of relief in understanding why life felt so hard for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think that's, everyone has to be suffering from some kind of stress. And even the most, when I use this in my counseling practice, even the most, I would say, people who feel they're pretty emotionally and mentally healthy still score pretty high on this, because we are experiencing a lot of stress, like you said, in the world that we live in. And so we don't mind telling everyone right now that you could look this up on Google, the Holmes Rahe, but it's RAHE life stress inventory. You could just pull it right up. If you wanted to email us at preservingfamiliespodcast@gmail.com, we'll send it to you. Yeah, it'd be a fun little family night activity, right?
Yeah, there's an awesome website that just calculates it for you as you click the button. So we'll drop the link maybe in the description, or they can email.
All right, so we've identified that we're all pretty stressed out. So now what do we do, right? What do we do, Cassie? What can we do? What do you recommend to some of these couples, like the couple that you just told us about that scored over a 900 on their stress test when the top ceiling is usually like a 300 or whatever?
Yeah, that was exponentially higher than anything I'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
So I definitely used an outlier example, but I think it is true. One thing that I do want to point out, it just is how sometimes understanding even what we're going through is really helpful in dealing with what we're going through. And I often think life feels out of control a lot of the time because we don't even have the capacity to just sit and recognize why, right? Mm-hmm. And that practice of noticing, hey, we did move this year. You did start a new job. You have a really rigorous church calling. Our kid isn't sleeping through the night. our adult children are struggling and it's requiring a lot more thought than it normally does. I mean, whatever it is, right? Just that ability to even, we use
Just
the phrase,
identify, right?
Yeah, there's a phrase that if you name it, you can tame it. Sometimes just naming even why we're stressed is a really helpful and compassionate exercise. I don't know if you see that for you in your practice.
Yeah, I think I can't believe how many people come in and I'll say, I think I know what's wrong with you. You have anxiety, or you have depression, or I say wrong with you, but
Not exactly,
we're not saying it that way, but we're saying, hey, I think I know what's going on here, right? And you'll tell them, and sometimes people just light up and go, that's what it is. And then the other weird part of that is sometimes that's all people want to know. They're like, oh, so that's what it is. I don't have cancer or anything. Okay, I'm done. And then they walk out.
No, I actually think that's one reason that mental health and talk therapy works, is because sometimes for the first time people are just saying out loud even what's happening in their life, and that feeling of naming it, it fixes something, right? Yeah. It's just acknowledging that it's there and someone validating it, and sometimes that's good enough.
Yeah, I've had that happen a few times at the doctor's office. Cass, I like this. So tell us, besides naming it, what are some other coping skills, though? What are some things couples can do to kind of help deal with this stress in their marriage and in their families?
It's such a good question. And I think that understanding that in some way might be like the answer to understanding how to get through life is how to cope. And for everyone, it is different. I often like to ask people just like, what do you find joy in? What do you actually like doing? And sometimes that helps us understand how they're coping. Everyone is coping. That's how we're all functioning. So again, just identifying how we're doing it, and then maybe finding good, better, best, maybe best or better ways to cope. Some of those ways might be talking to someone, not even a mental health therapist per se, but just having someone in your life you can share that you're struggling with.
You can talk things through, and like you said,
gaining social support. For me personally, that looks like my sisters, my parents, my husband, my friends, things, finding enjoyable activities to do, breathing
exercises. On enjoyable activities, as I know you mentioned that a minute ago, but it is amazing how many of us get so busy that we just stop doing the things that we love doing, right?
Totally. So I'll give you maybe some examples that often when I bring those up with clients, they're like, wait, that's coping? I had no idea.
Yeah.
Things like playing with your pet, baking, gardening, playing an instrument, doing yoga, exercising, praying is a huge one. Any form of
like recreation, right? Like if you like to ski or play pickleball or whatever it is, right? People
even I often joke, I think there's a running joke around like young moms that sometimes just running to Swig at like 3 p.m. and getting a drink, like that's
you guys
something
used to say,
that
treat yourself.
treat yourself. Really, I mean, that is a form of coping that it's fun to have a little ritual during the day that breaks up the monotonous life of stay at home.
I have a colleague at BYU. He's awesome. And if you talk to him at the right time of day and say, hey, where are you headed? He'll say, I'm going to go down and play pickleball for an hour. And I know that just is so helpful to him. And I think, what am I doing? Just grinding out every day when I could be doing something fun like that.
Really, though. I mean, really going to see a movie, doodling, listening to music. For some people, maybe even playing a video game. It's de-stressing. It's enjoyable. There are more maybe backed scientific researched ideas like making a gratitude list, meditating, practicing deep breathing, getting outside. It is so crazy. I remember when I was postpartum with my first daughter, I called you, Dad, crying, and just felt incredibly overwhelmed by the world change that had just happened to me. And I remember you told me that I need to go outside every single day. And it seems so simple, right? But when I was in those first few weeks of having a new child and my husband was at school and at work and it was just me and her at home, I wasn't getting out. I was kind of plopped in my recliner trying to navigate all these things that felt so big and heavy. And just that advice to go on a walk for a few minutes, something about seeing sunlight and having fresh air and moving your body feels like a win-win-win when our mental health isn't the best.
Right. And I think, Cassie, of a speaker I heard once who they went through the experience of having 7 children, and one of their children died like in their infancy, and it just had happened. And the family was just really, what's a good word? Just sullen, sad, just moping around for a while.
I couldn't imagine.
Because it wasn't just the parents and their loss, but it was the children having lost a little sibling,
Wow.
And then the father told what we did? We went camping, and that changed everything. We just had to get out of our little world that we were living in and go do something different. And even though a lot of people would say camping, that's how you, we know Jim Gaffigan wouldn't love that, but anyway, that was what it took to get them back on track, so.
That's such a cool story too of just emotional resilience, because I do want to acknowledge that when we're talking just about work stress and life stress, sometimes it feels maybe easy to be like, take some time to go and play a game of pickleball. And when we're talking about things like real mental health or mood disorders, it's crazy how someone struggling with depression to go on a walk would truly feel like trying to climb Mount Everest, right? Those are huge things. And it does take this tenacity and grit to say, it feels really hard, but I'm going to step outside today. And sometimes just the smallest little tasks. That's really, I always say, I hate to say this, because the only way to really manage depression and anxiety is to get up and try, right? Like you have to start this momentum that will build, and one day it won't be as hard to go on a walk or to do yoga or to take deep breaths, things that maybe don't feel as hard to someone else. But I do want to acknowledge that sometimes these things feel really, really difficult for people.
Yeah, it's not easy all the time. And I think, Cassie, from a gospel perspective, as we talk about what can ground us and what can help us deal with these stressors, I think a lot of people would say listening to awesome music, listening to whether it be the hymns or just more contemporary music, even Christian music, instrumental music, but also to study the gospel, to study the scriptures. I know when I start my day off that way with that and reading from our living prophets, their words, I always feel just so much lighter. A lot of people feel a lot of that strength and fortification that comes from being in the temple often, and so there are resources in a spiritual way too to help us deal with these coping strategies.
Totally.
Right?
And that's evidence-based. Religious people report higher life satisfaction.
Right.
By so much, right?
By engaging and participating in their
when you think
faith,
of why, right? It's probably because of those faith-based coping skills that are just implemented in the religion itself.
Yeah. Well, Cassie, this has been some a lot of fascinating things. I know there's a lot of different things we can do to relieve stress. What would you like to share as we finish today?
Yeah, maybe just recapping the thought we've had, that sometimes even just identifying that we are stressed, and talking overtly about that in our relationships can be a good step to connection and relief.
Yeah.
I previously said I could tell a story about that later. Maybe I'll share it now. I kind of referenced when I was a new mom and that I wasn't in the best mental state a few years ago when I had my first daughter.
Yeah.
My husband and I later that year found ourselves in a situation in our marriage where we both just weren't feeling super happy. It felt like whenever we were together, we were fighting. It felt like we just were snappy at each other. We were mad. I don't even know what else to say, right? But one day it kind of came to, and I was sobbing, and we had this kind of explosive argument that luckily have been pretty rare in our marriage. And we started saying, like, maybe we need to go to therapy. I don't know what isn't working right. And here's me, who's a marriage therapist at the time, just feeling like, what is happening in my own relationship? And something, because I am a therapist, right, I had the knowledge of that inventory I was talking about earlier.
Right.
And he and I took it one night, and our score was actually also pretty high, higher than the 300s. I'll just say that. But It was a really significant thing for us to point out all the things that had happened to us, not even in the last 2 years, but even in the last 9 months at the time.
Right.
We had just had a new baby. We moved across the country. My husband graduated college. I had a job change. We left family. We experienced financial changes. We had purchased 2 different cars. We had gone on 5 different vacations. I mean, vacation's a loose term, right? But trips.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting stuff right now, but it was such an aha moment for us. And as I talked about that couple I worked with earlier and how they broke into laughter, I can't say we necessarily did that, but we did gain this deep compassionate understanding towards each other and the things that we had gone through just in that huge year. And my husband always jokes now, we're 3 years past that, but he always jokes now that it's his mission in life to tell new married couples, or even like couples who just have their first baby, that's normal, right? It's normal to have a hard year. It's normal to feel disconnected. It's normal to experience resentment and to feel frustration and to project that you're not sleeping and your anger onto your spouse and not your baby. And we always joke, right? Because we went through that. We're like, we want to warn everyone that that's a really hard thing. But
right.
That was such an important thing that we went through together, and to come out of that just feeling so compassionate of each other and the things that we had gone through that year. That's been a kind of a significant foundation that we built our marriage on, because we had a baby pretty early.
Sure.
To just always maybe be more aware of what's happening to each other and what's happening in our lives that are in our control and out of our control, that are contributing to why we're showing up the way that we are.
No, I love that. I think that's great. No, that's great, because it's normal, right? It makes it normal, and it helps us see that all of us have trouble, right? All of us have challenges. And I think what happens a lot of times, Cass, is that people recognize the stress in their life, but they don't really do anything with it. They don't do anything about it. And so I think that would be our LDS today, our let's do something. And that is, let's take that inventory, right? That'd be kind of a fun thing for everyone to do. We've kind of talked about it in here, but then also identify some kind of stress reliever that we could do, probably as a couple, but also individually. I know that back in the old days when we had all of you guys in the house, Mom would look at me every now and then and say, you know what you need to do? You need to go play racquetball with your buddies. I'm like, no, I'm okay. And she's like, no, you need to go. You're going. And that was her way of saying, because you're acting like a nut, and you need to go do something physical, you know? And so identify the physical thing or the outdoor thing or whatever it is that you need to do to help relieve some stress. If you're an introvert, that would look one way. If you're an extrovert, it would look totally different, right?
Totally. My husband and I are very opposite. Like, I would love to bake something and take a bath while I listen to a podcast, and he wants to probably go play racquetball with his friends, or not racquetball, right? But basketball.
But he'd want to go do some outdoor thing with his buddies, you know, kind of thing.
And he'd actually want to do it with me, but I'm like, you go do it with your friend.
And your mom would, my wife, your mom would want to build a puzzle for 3 weeks in a cabin somewhere locked away. So while she drinks hot chocolate and watches Hallmark movies, right? So
yeah, there really are a ton of cliche things though, right? Like exercise, breathing, getting sunlight, but things like that are incredibly valuable. So I think that's such good advice.
Yeah. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for being with us today. Awesome. It was great to have my daughter from Dallas with us, and we're going to do this again, right?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Hopefully that helps someone.
It's going to help somebody. Guys, everyone who's listening, pass this around to those that you love that could benefit by it. And we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, have a wonderful, awesome week.